You know, when something as traumatic as, you know, being burned at 14 happened to me, it was the most traumatic thing that happened in my family's life as well. I sat down one-to-one with all of them, probably for the first time in 30 years, and talked about what it was like for them. I wasn't going to use my story to heal myself. So much of what you need inside of you, and you're the only blocker for that. I found that often the biggest gifts and the biggest tools are in the darkest moments. And if we shine a light on those, then we can dig up some unbelievable gold and some gifts that you can apply for today. Do we necessarily always have to go back straight to the darkest of times and work forward and try and find the light from there? Can we not? Because how you are is ultimately how you will end up seeing yourself. It needs to come from you. It needs to come from within here. There were moments, you know, in the darkest parts of my journey where I never felt more alive. Adversity is not what happens to us. It's how we face it. No one chooses adversity, but it's going to come our way whether we like it or not. My God, like, look at the gifts I was given at 14 to just be who I was and figure out like a way forward without thinking, should I be a different way? Am I fitting in? Am I doing these things? No, this is who I am. This is all I've got. The future's uncertain. Let's go for it. And you figure that out. So if we can give young people that freedom and those tools, then they'll figure it out for themselves.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. We're sharing the stories of our guests. I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey.
Need a new van? Why not pop down to Rivervale in Brighton? Explore our range of new and used vans, lovingly prepared and ready to work just as hard as you do. Rivervale, making motoring manageable.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to welcome back for a second time, for part two, my good friend, Mr. Marc Convey. Marc, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted and honoured to be back on again.
All right. Look, you first joined when we explored. It was such an amazing episode, and we explored your inspirational story, right? And about from your accident, obviously at 14, what impact that had on your life, and went through your story, and it was just such an inspiring conversation. I remember getting to the end actually, and it was a real game changer for me. So I remember getting to the end and just thinking, like, oh, we're gonna have to do this again, because especially at that part of your journey as well, you was just about to go on to do different things and explore new stuff. So it was a real turning point for me, and I know for you as well. And I've been reading obviously what you post and your Substack and some of your writings and stuff, and I know you've gone on a journey and a lot deeper, right? And some real deep thinking, which was amazing, which I'm really keen to explore. Obviously walking away from the business, and you've travelled, etc., and nearly finished your book, which is very, very exciting. But there's a few things I'd really love to explore. I guess a lot what the last few years has taught you, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some of the deeper questions about life, adversity, and sometimes, especially with adversity, what is forced obviously to ask you at a young age, right? That's what I want to sort of touch on. But one of the questions I want to really, just not to answer now really, but just to think about while we're exploring, is just what changes in someone's life when they start reconnecting with themselves. And can we help young people start asking those questions earlier? Something I want to just have a little think about. But before we dive in, I want to check in. You obviously come to the event the other day. You can see what I'm doing with obviously you all right, mate. So just look, however you landed today, this season of your life, where you are. Marc Convey, you all right, mate?
I am all right, mate. Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good these days. I feel like really grounded as a person, and that's a lot to do with kind of connecting with myself more and understanding myself more and understanding my energy. And that's what a lot of the last few years have been about since we last spoke. So I'm really really consistent these days. I don't get too high, don't get too low. I try and stay in this what I call the zone of contentment. So I'm content and happy to be here.
Love that zone of contentment. Yeah, it's a nice place to be, eh? Love that. Well, look, one thing as well, moving on, I wanted to ask, because obviously going back over our last conversation, and obviously the journey that the podcast has gone on itself, one thing, it was just before really maybe the turn of that all that, and probably helped shape a lot of, I guess, the future episodes for me, which is why it was such a pivotal episode and conversation. But success, right? Like, I never actually directly asked you the question. We skirted around it and we explored certain aspects of your life and the story. But so I'm really keen to find out what does success mean to you? How do you define it?
Yeah, I think it would have been a pretty different answer if you'd asked me a few years ago to what it is now. I think success to me is being in a position in life where I'm able to be decent to myself and decent to those around me. Mm-hmm. So if you want to kind of go a bit deeper in that, it's it's how I connect with myself and connect with people around me.
Yeah. Amazing. And what do you think, like, had I asked you that direct question a few years back, what would have led that then, do you think?
I think it would be more still living too much from the outside in terms of how people saw me and how the impact that I could have on the world. It's almost like I needed to measure my value with too much about helping other people before I put myself first, and not from a place that's egotistical, from a very grounded place and understanding core values and those kind of things. And I think we can unpack some of this in today's episode. Yeah. But it was definitely would have been still too much living from the outside in.
Yeah. Yeah, mate, I love that. And I think, it's so, like, I think the exploration for me that's been such a, say revelation, but something certainly over the course of the nearly 150 episodes now, and even the stuff that we're doing with schools and going in, like, we do live in a society that's so external. And knowing the people I've spoke to that have maybe reached the top and got all them external things, and it's still, if you're empty here, if you're empty inside, or you don't know who the real person is, who's inside, will you ever experience real success?
Yeah, totally. I used to be a really big believer in, and it was maybe drilled into me through education, in the kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in terms of, get your accommodation, your shelter, and all those basic things right before you then put yourself in the equation and the picture and the other stuff. Whereas I just think that's complete nonsense these days. I think it needs to be much more whole and inclusive of all those things. So that's when I said, if I can be decent to myself and to other people, I've got those things in place, but I'm also in a position where I can connect and, offer space to people and be empathic and be respected myself, right? Yeah, it's important that it's two-way communication.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing, obviously, I'm really keen to explore as well is that, like you said, that relationship with yourself. Like when you, I know we explored it last time, you support other people and you serve other people and help other people, and sometimes, and I obviously I resonate with that, and maybe a people pleaser, and you go out and you always try and you almost, your value or your self-worth becomes related to that, right? And when you start to do the work on yourself a little bit more and not be a bit kinder to yourself, right? It's such a, I guess this, again, back to I'll keep referring back to what we're going to hopefully teach kids, but giving kids those skills to be able to to ask those questions and actually and love themselves, right, from an early age, that know that their self-worth and their success or whatever that looks like is not an external thing. It is going to come from inside. So
Yeah, totally.
well, look, let's talk to me about the last few years. I guess like I know you started to go on a journey then after our last conversation. So, but you left the business, you've gone traveling in your van, you've been writing. Talk to, because I remember I wrote a quote down here that you'd sort of said in the first thing: for 30 years I was running headfirst into life like Forrest Gump running across America. I remember that. It really landed with me, right?
Yeah.
Really landed. But then you stopped running. What made you stop running? And then explain, I guess, what's happened over the last few years. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, I stopped running, and then I think I might have rebounded a bit and started running in a different direction for a little while. So in one sense, I stopped running in terms of not looking back, continuous forward motion and movement, and trying to do things and, adventures in life and career and business, and giving up and leaving, 23D, my video agency, after, building it up over 5 years, was the leap that I made. And then very quickly, and in one way I can say maybe too quickly, I rebounded into another startup. And I was still involved in that startup when we had the conversation.
So that was Thrive.
That was Thrive Now.
Yeah.
Now that wasn't, looking back, it wasn't a mistake, but 15 months into that journey, I also exited that company. And it was a purposeful leadership training company. So we did one-to-one coaching with leaders, circle coaching, and we ran 2 retreats in that time as well. So all we wanted to do was have the impact on purpose-led leaders, for them to then go out and make the change in the world that we need to see. Multiple, in terms of mental health, environmental, whatever it may be. And I think, again, on looking at it one way, it was too soon for me to do that. And it was an easy place for me to fall into. I had 2 amazing co-founders, and Nicole, especially one of my co-founders, an incredible leadership coach, and more than that, like a human coach. And 15 months working with her taught me an awful lot. Suddenly I had so many more words and understandings and techniques to really know myself a bit better. And it was she that taught me the power of living from the inside out rather than the outside in, the power of core values, and how energy works in our body, in terms of if it's, up in your head and kind of ego, then you can be very lightweight and be tipped over. If it's too much in the middle, too masculine, you think you're holding steady, but someone can still come and push you over quite easily. Whereas if your energy is grounded within yourself and away from your ego, it's like you're rooted a lot more. So understanding that, and there's definitely a bit of a nod to kind of the spiritual side of thinking without being too woo-woo. Nothing against woo-woo, but this is not what it was. But I started to get founder wobbles again with that. Arun J, our other co-founder, he was working for the UN, and he was being pulled back into that work. So I had to take on more of the CEO roles. And suddenly I felt that I was in a position that I'd tried to get away from in 23D just by circumstance. And the irony of the whole situation is that the second and final retreat that we held, we'd taken on a new facilitator, so I didn't necessarily need to host with a number of delegates that we had there. And we had a last minute attendee pull out because of COVID. So we had odd numbers and we needed even numbers. So Nicole and Joe, who's another amazing coach, suggested I go in and be an attendee and explore, the founder wobbles that I was having. And I think even up until that point, I didn't really understand what core values were. And still the values that I was living by and had been living by through those years of running into life were positivity and resilience, because that's what I'd been known for, right? This resilient kid who survived and went through this recovery and somehow then just ran into life with this, great spirit and attitude and really positive. But really, I noticed on that retreat that I was living my life still through the eyes of other people and the labels that they put upon me. and they weren't things that I could root myself in and ground myself in and create my own North Star. So through that 3-day retreat, we did an awful lot of work on core values, and it was extraordinary. Like everyone who went on those 2 retreats, their life changed for the better afterwards, because we don't do enough work on core values, and we don't, it was brutal. We had to stand up in front of each other and say, this is what I think my core values are. And people be like, no, I'm not feeling your energy, and that's not it. So it was brutal, but it was in a really safe space that no one said, okay, I need to think about that more. So you went from a long list to a short list to a really short list. And I came out at the end of that with just 2 core values that are still my core values today, which are connection and freedom. Wow. And then I jumped in my camper van that you talked about. I made a promise on that retreat to go and take my camper van away, because I'd had it for a few months, but I wasn't taking it away because I was so worried about the business and trying to sell these retreat spots and trying to build up a business again. And my God, I'm doing this all over again, and feeling stressed and edging towards burnout yet again, and creating that space for myself and going away and realizing that these were my core values. I realized that I couldn't run this company and live for those core values. So there were a lot of, tearful conversations with my co-founders, and Nicole didn't want to do it without me. So the irony was that retreat was so successful that it brought the company down. No, it's brutal, right?
Wow. But what a powerful thing to come out of that, though, right? Like, and knowing that, that the retreats work then.
Yeah, they work. I know. Like, 2 and out.
Yeah, wow. That's so... I'm really keen to explore about that with the values, because I
tried to get you on that second retreat, by the way, but you turned me down.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I wish I'd come on it now. Anyway, moving on. But this is something I find really fascinating, because we part of the men's program that we've developed is, again, we ask people to look at their values, right? And you recognise that some people have never even thought about it before. And again, my question is, what age do you think we can start to look at that? Start to look at our core values?
Well, I think we can understand that they can evolve, right? So they don't have to be fixed. And I think you can embed values to a point where they just become part of who you are. So even, through that retreat, I had compassion as a 3rd one. But then I realized that it's just embedded within me, and I don't need to use that as a marker. So simplify it down: freedom and connection. Am I going to be able to connect with myself and other people? Can I feel free and not trapped? Can I be free from my own trauma and free to live life? So these things are really important to me. I think we can do it from a young age. Again, it goes with, for me, in a sort of a bigger package of understanding that you need to live for yourself first and foremost. But that doesn't mean to do it in a narcissistic way. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, especially around adolescent males growing up, is that they're given that message that they need to put themselves first and make things happen. But when we're talking about the manosphere, or whatever you want to call it, and the red pill thing, so I just watched the Louis Theroux in preparation for today. I watched it last night, amazing, and I think so much of their messaging in that is actually really strong, but it's completely out of context for what's really going to help the individual. And it's very much like up here, and and it's egotistical and it's narcissistic, and it doesn't help you connect with other people. It might help you connect with yourself, but then the only people that you're eventually going to connect with are people within an echo chamber. And I think we're living in a society where we're in too many echo chambers, and it's a polarized world. There's binary thinking, and so much of life lives in the grey. So I think it's important that we can do it at an age where there is self-awareness emerging. And I think that can happen in teenage years when you're going through puberty as a young man. You're very neuroplastic. And if we can create the foundations for men at that age, and I think the work that especially you're doing at primary school creates curiosity. And I think if we can inspire primary school children to have a curious mind about themselves, but also about other people. So a lack of judgment at that point without trying to embed too much, make it fun. And then when they get into the more adolescent age and you become self-aware, because you do when you're a teenager, when that kicks in, then that's when they're probably the most neuroplastic that they've been since they were, going through toddler phase of growth and baby phase. And I then think about that through the lens of my own story and realize the adversity that I went through at that age and the context that I went through that in and how powerful that was and how I was so fortunate that I had people around me that didn't try to save me, didn't try to give me too much instruction, gave me that freedom and empowerment to find out who I was, but did so in the context of a loving, supportive. I think I said to you maybe in the first time, if I fell down, yes, people would pick me up, but then as soon as I was able to use my own legs, they'd encourage me to walk and think for myself. And I think there's a huge amounts of uncertainty in the world going forward, and I think that instills a lot of fear in young people, but I don't think it has to. I think that openness, that uncertainty, just gives you more freedom. Why would you want to follow the rules? And A doesn't lead to B, doesn't lead to C, doesn't lead to E. We've been told that, and that's the education system we had that's been based on going back to the Industrial Revolution to create worker bees going out. So that uncertainty doesn't have to be scary. It can be empowering. You can choose your own path forward.
But it is, isn't it? This is maybe the problem for me, that it's embedded in us that uncertainty equals fear, right? It's a scary discomfort. If I'm uncertain about the future, I'm going to sit in discomfort, and we find it difficult, I think, especially if we're going back to kids as well, and even as parents, we don't want our kids to feel discomfort, so we make it easy, and we live in a society that everything's made easier now, right? So there's not that struggle necessarily, and there's not that thing. We just want to remove discomfort, but actually we can find out so much about ourselves sitting in that discomfort, right? I think that's which I'm keen to explore. Like, for how was that when you're doing that work on yourself? I think from my experience, I think for the first time, like, there's been such a massive transition for me the last 18 months, and this is why I'm keen to explore with you on it. But like for me, me and Kelly separated, and I sat for the first time probably in my life the last year in discomfort, like on my own. Like, I'm a people person, I'm around everyone, and you get the energy from people, and but all I was doing was distracting myself. So sitting in that discomfort on my own and doing and for the first time in my life, journaling and breath work, and also like really exploring myself. And it's been fucking hard. I'll be honest, it's been really hard. So I'm keen for you on that journey over the last few years.
Yeah.
Uncertainty as well, and how has that been for you? Has there been?
Yeah, I knew I needed to go a lot deeper. So talking with you the first time was the first time that I'd really sat and kind of heard myself speak about it like that. And then the breakup with Thrive Now happened, and suddenly I'm on my own again. And I knew I needed to explore that journey, but I also knew that it wasn't my journey alone. When something as traumatic as being burned at 14 happened to me, it was the most traumatic thing that happened in my family's life as well. So out of respect, the first thing I did was I jumped back in my camper van. I went over to Ireland, which is where most of my family are, and the accident happened. And I sat down one-to-one with all of them, probably for the first time in 30 years, and talked about what it was like for them and their experiences, and said to them, look, I'm going to go big on this. I don't know what that means, but part of my future is going to be sharing my story, and I'm not asking for permission, but it'd be lovely to have you on board. And they were almost like counselling sessions, one-on-one, and there was a lot of tears, not from me, surprisingly. I felt really solid in it, and which is great, that I knew that I had that I wasn't going to use my story to heal myself as I was doing it. I waited long enough that I felt that I was healed and I'd got enough out of life, running into life, that I was doing it. So I did that and got the tick. And then I came back and I was like, right, I need to just brain dump here. So I spent that summer just bullet pointing everything I could remember from every moment of my recovery and journey and life, everything that people had said to me. And then I jumped back in my van and I drove and just created space to think, not to rush it. So I just drove thousands of miles around Europe, and I'd I might put a self-help podcast on for an hour and then I'd turn it off and I'd just drive for 2 hours and think. And then I'd often have to stop at the side of the road and get my journal out and start writing. And then I realized that, writing, was the key. So I just write and write and write and not force anything to come, just create the space within myself to allow things to come. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to be a motivational speaker. That's a great way of going out and, road testing my story, seeing what feedback I get in real time. But I tried to launch myself at a time when that market really contracted, with Donald Trump coming in and like people pulling back on all these, sort of well-being budgets within the corporate space where a lot of the money was. And I started to realize that I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm a storyteller and I've got this powerful story to tell. And I want to inspire people to retell their own stories in a way that serves them. But until I do that for myself and figure that out, then I don't know what that looks like. So then it was another kind of minor pivot. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to start a Substack. And at first I thought, I could monetize this. Again, still those little success things creeping in, right? It's like, I could be really big on Substack. But very quickly writing that, I realized there wasn't the purpose of that blog. It was to create a safe space for me to write that's still public enough that I could get some feedback from people that don't know me. But also within that safe space, it gives room for people who are stakeholders in my journey to read, to feedback, to contribute if they want. It gave them space to heal when they needed to heal. It was also a space to remind them of the incredible support that they gave me. It reminded us all how resilient we were. It reminded us of what we got through and the lessons that we could apply in all our lives. It got people in my family talking for the first time when people weren't talking. So it's having an enormous impact, but within a pond, right? I wanted to create little ripples in my own pond to start with and find a voice. It needed to be, I realized it needed to be that when I needed to be a book, and it needed to be more than just a memoir. It needed to be something that would help people retell their own stories in a way that serves them in today, in the present. And I honestly feel like on that journey that I've been on, that our own stories are the most powerful resource we have. They're the easiest to access. They're free in a world where we've been turned from civilians into consumers, and it started with products and technology, and now it's going into our mental health. And you need a subscription for that. You need to pay for that. You need to go on someone's course. It's like so much of what you need inside of you, and you're the only blocker for that, or the environment you're in is a blocker for that. So if we can help people again connect with themselves, but they connect with themselves within an empowering, supportive community around them, and often that is much smaller than you think you need, then it can unlock so much potential within people, and you can find the tools within yourself, within your own journey. And I found that often the biggest gifts and the biggest tools are in the darkest moments. And if we shine a light on those, then we can dig up some unbelievable gold and some gifts that you can apply for today. Because you've got through those tough times, then you can use whatever you got through those tough times to get through future tough times.
So someone listening, right, he's in a dark time, and where do they start? Because maybe they're in a dark time, revisiting a dark time that, and actually the story they're telling themselves maybe isn't the best one, because they've got these archaic stories and narratives that they've been listening to. Where do they start to break that? How can they start to break that, to unlock that connection, freedom, whatever it.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that over the last summer. I thought a lot about that because, you know, for me, the biggest gifts that I found are within that 5-year recovery period as a teenager. But I'm very fortunate that, you know, I didn't get PTSD, and that period doesn't fill me with a huge amount of fear. And a lot of that was in, you know, because of the context of how I recovered and the people I had around me, whereas that's not the same for other people. And often the thing that causes that trauma is often the people around them and the relationships that they had in those dark times. So it's not easy to go back to the darkest of times to find the biggest gifts. And so I thought I'd start thinking, is this almost like a muscle that we need to build up to? Can we start smaller and build things up? And do we necessarily always have to go back straight to the darkest of times and work forward and try and find the light from there? Can we not start with the light and start with the smaller things and then trace that light backwards? So start with what is good in your life at present and what you're grateful for. It could be, you know, a way that you think about the world. It could be a relationship that you have. It could be a status you have. It could be a job. It could be whatever you want it to be, right? You don't need to overthink it too much and be like, okay, I'm really grateful that I've got that in my life right now. And then trace that back. And often when you trace that back, it will trace back into a shadow somewhere, or a moment of change, or something traumatic or adverse that happened that forced you down a slightly different path. Now, if you then bring that back into the light and do that, it's like that thing that you probably you might not realize. And it may well go in several different directions before you trace it back to the origin point of that. But then you might be something that, oh God, that's something I tried to bury in the past. And actually, if that didn't happen, that wouldn't have forced me to make the changes in my life that have now led to something that I'm really grateful for. So therefore, that thing doesn't hold power over me anymore. It doesn't fill me with as much fear. And then you can start with something else, trace it back. And all of a sudden you start realizing, God, all these things that I tried to leave in the past and tried to bury, actually, they were the start points for so many good things that I've got. And then you start being able to be more comfortable with going into the bigger things. And some people might need to do that in therapy. People might need to do that in support groups. Some people might need to do that through journaling, or all of the above. But definitely doing so in a context that, you know, you have the right support around you, whatever that is for you. I think is important, because you need to do this safely. You know, I'm no psychologist, and this is just, you know, what's worked for me. I'm telling the story as what worked for me. I don't have the answers for other people. What I want to do is inspire them to find out what the answers are for themselves, because there's no one method fixes all, in my opinion.
I agree with that, and I think you're so right, because there's so many. I guess I'm just trying to. I think about your story, and again back to even the first episode, and, you know, looking at the trauma and the adversity that you did face at that time. And I remember you saying in that sort of first episode that you'd almost come at peace with that, and you was able to put, and so it wasn't ever going to define the whole of your life, right? That was something but you can use it. You can use that story and that adversity and that trauma for purpose and for good and for moving forward, right? And I think that's where, like, for something there really key for me is that gratitude, that finding those little glimmers, that something, that little light of hope of something in life, right? That we're all searching for, we all need, especially when you're in them darkest times. It's hard to see that light, right? It's hard to see that. But if we really, really think about it, we've all got something to, we're here, right? Even if it's just that we're here, and be grateful for that. And like you said, how can we work back and find where that path comes from, and we can unlock it? And I think you're right, there's so many different, like, breath work was something that unlocked it for me. I've done the deep, like the conscious connected breath work, and that I've never journaled in my life. after that, I nearly wrote a book after that first session. I blubbed for an hour and a half, and then I wrote for an hour. You know what I mean? So I think everyone's going to find their own thing. But I guess it's just, again, I'm trying to look at and what skills we can give kids to be able to, because we're gonna face adversity at some point in our life. Everyone's gonna face something at some point. Some really traumatic, some not so much, but there's going to be something that we will face where there'll be tough time. Sometimes it might just be a real mental health struggle that is hit them for whatever reason, midlife or what. But is there skills that, like I say, I wonder from your point of view, that did you almost develop those skills because you was forced to at a young age?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me it was, the adversity was so great. It was survival to start with, right?
Yeah.
So the first, period of my recovery was just pure body. And then the kind of the second phase was the mind. Then when the body didn't need to suck up all the resources just to stay alive, it created a bit more space within me. And then the mind came into it. But I think in terms of techniques, just to circle back to that, and mindfulness, for me, they're not, from my own experience, they're not the answer in and themselves. They're maintenance tools to allow the more powerful stuff to emerge. So they can help keep you grounded, help create this space that then you can journal. And then suddenly that journaling is what comes out of that space that you've created because you did the breath work to allow that to happen. Is what can keep you grounded. What was really powerful for me, and again, it comes back to connection. It was that I was seen, even in the darkest moments. I was seen as someone that was still whole. I was seen as someone that, even though I was a huge taker of resources, and looking for the better words of it, resource drain, that even though I was taking up that resource, what I was giving back was equal to the resource that I was taking. So the people around me were, even when I was going through some really tough times, what they reflected back to me was that I was still adding value to their lives, right? And if we can help people and young people, and this is really for anyone, not even just for young people, anyone, going through any kind of adversity, is that often, and especially, when this comes to, suicide and suicide prevention, which I've done, I've done a fair bit in the last few years as well, is that there's this shame in there. And if someone's going through a tough time, they feel like that they're sucking up resources from someone else. And that shame leads to isolation, and that breaks that connection that is so desperately needed. Whereas often, so for me, it's not necessarily about techniques. It's anyone at any point in their lives to be seen as who they are, and it's okay, whatever they're going through, and just being allowed to be seen, and then getting that positive feedback from someone, that you are worthy and you're adding value to my life. And even though you might be draining some hard resources in terms of time or therapy or all these different things, there's this unseen power that you're giving back, because people want you to stay around and be there. And if you can hand that power to someone, and that's what I mean by empowerment, that even though you might be thinking, I'm here helping you, that's why for me, mentorship is a two-way thing. It really is. It's like when you hang out with a lot of, younger guys and chat them through, and I don't like really calling it mentorship, because I'm getting just as much back from them as they're getting from me, just by me sitting with them and sharing my story. And I make them realize that, and how happy and proud they are. And then that drags people through dark times. So for me, it's more of a kind of a mindset and empowerment thing than necessarily specific techniques that will help people get through times of adversity.
Yeah, because the word that come out for me there that hit me a little bit was isolation. Right? Why is it that because the shame around, I guess part of the problem, I wonder, and I'm looking at, is that we can have that connection with people, and people can tell someone how much value they give and how important they are. But if that person really doesn't believe it, how do we, and that's where it comes back to what you just mentioned, I think, about mindset, right? It's how do we help people make that shift in their mindset because when you're in that low place, you're really struggling, and you've got maybe a great network around you and great people that are showing you how much value. It's when you don't believe it enough, and you don't see it, like you said about being seen, right? Other people can see you, and I've said to other people before, and try and tell myself this sometimes, like, I wish you could see yourself how other people see you, because you can be, you're great and you're doing amazing things.
Yeah.
But how do we help to really feel that ourselves? And I wonder is that something you've learned on your journey the last few years about the connecting with yourself?
Yeah, but I learned by going back to that 5-year journey. I realised that was my recovery journey as a teenager was the biggest resource that I had. So I learned in the last few years to go deeper into that and go and back to that, and I realised that I think the kind of the work that I want to do, the impact I want to have, sits maybe a bit further upstream than a lot of what's happening, and a lot with the work that you're trying to do, and I think it's really valuable. But I think my niche sits a bit further upstream, and it's on, it may sound harsh this, but it's on what you can do for yourself, and realizing that your well-being is your own responsibility, and that if you're always looking for someone to help you, then it's never going to be sustainable, and you're never going to create the roots that you need. If you imagine yourself as a tree and create those roots, and so that you can like sway in the wind at the top, but you're grounded at the bottom. And that may sound harsh, but for me, it's again, that frees me up. It's like, and if we're going back to teenage kids, they hate being told what to do. It's just like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're going to tell yourself what to do. But at the same time, how do you kind of inspire them to figure out what really matters to them in life? What are their interests? What are their core values? What are the things that make them feel alive? And then match that with, it's up to you. It's you and you before anyone else. Your well-being is your responsibility. And it may sound tough, but
no, I think you're right. Because I think it's even obviously, from some account, like Carlos has been on, and we talked about very much around like agency, having agency over your own thoughts and feeling, and that we are like what you're saying, like we're responsible for that. So, and I always caveat with a lot of the stuff that we say, like when people face adversity, when they're in their dark times, when mental health struggles and stuff like that, we don't. Sometimes we don't have a choice about what happens to us, right? Like you're an example, with your ex and stuff, we can't. It wasn't a choice that that's going to happen to you, right? But we do have a choice. We do have a choice how we react to those things, right? And that's where we can take the responsibility. Like I can choose. Like I've had a couple of people on recently who, one brain tumor and one's got terminal cancer, and they're talking about like, I choose how I'm going to show up today in the world. And I think like that, that alone, that gives us that agency to be able to. And I think if we can give that kids that response, it is your responsibility. There's going to be people. Great to surround yourself with great people, but it's your responsibility, and you need to take agency of that, of what you are moving forward. And I guess the other point to that was with the core values, like getting them to them questions, maybe at schools and education and stuff, we're just asking the wrong questions to kids, right? That's where I think maybe there's a shift needs to happen. That within this, imagine asking kids the questions that you just presented, like what lights you up? Where do you, what what are your values? What life do you want to lead in alignment with those? We start asking them questions at a young age. Surely we're going to develop more rounded human beings that will, when they then inevitably face that adversity, they've got them skills, right?
Yeah, definitely. And, we kind of hammer home a message of be kind, to other people, which is obviously really important, but be kind to yourself as well, and don't wait for someone to be kind to you before you're kind to them. Be kind to someone else, because that is in itself being kind to yourself. Being a decent person to other people. And it comes back to what, my definition of success at the beginning starts with being decent to yourself. If you're decent to yourself, it's easier to be decent to other people, and even be decent to people that hurt you, right? We're trying to, there's so many individuals in the world at the moment that they're bringing out the worst of us as individuals. And it's a time to double down on even showing empathy to, the worst characters that are out there. Because so often, so much of the reason why they're at their stage in life is because of some unhealed trauma within themselves. We're just seeing the outputs and we judge the outputs, but let's look at the inputs as well. And then, and allow someone not to be perfect in your presence, but then don't let that impact how you are, because how you are is ultimately how you will end up seeing yourself. It needs to come from you. It needs to come from within here. I don't wait for someone else to be kind to me. And I learnt that through being someone with a visible difference and going out into the world, is that, someone says a comment to me or does anything, it's like what they're doing is just opening up who they are and what they're going through inside. It's nothing about me and my appearance. It's someone who's in pain. So at that point, it's like, okay, well, the best thing I can do for myself is to show that person compassion and empathy. And now I don't need to go over there and put an arm around and say, you're right, mate. Why have you just, called, something about my disfigurement? And it's, but what I can do is walk away and still feel completely fine about myself, and knowing that, whatever's going on in their lives is way worse than whatever's going on inside myself. Would you prefer to be someone who's robbed or a robber? Rob me every single day of the week.
Wow. But that takes such a, I think, to put yourself in that position does take a lot of self-awareness, right? To be able to allow that. And is that something that you developed quite early on? I guess after the accident and that period of life, those few years afterwards, is that something you developed then, or has that come later?
Yeah, no, totally. I think I was very lucky that I had certain character traits like within me, a kind of natural sort of sense of confidence, and my Irish background, I've got this quick wit and charm, and I remember walking down the hospital corridor one day very, very clearly. And up until that point, I was kind of, that fierceness within me was there. So I'd like stare someone out until they looked away, and I always won. And then one day I'm like walking down the corridor and someone looks at me and I just smile. And that smile just like broke down their defensiveness or their curiosity or their concern or whatever was this kind of fixed look they had on their face was. And I was like, okay, I impacted that person with what I just did. I very clearly remember. So I was like, it's not up to the other person to make that little social interaction a pleasant one before I can feel comfortable about who I am because of what's happened to me. I have that power too. Now, what do I have in my locker? Okay, I have this, big personality and this quick wit, and I can think very quickly on the spot. So I just started to think, okay, that's a tool now, and the people around me recognize that, right? So at 14, I was given the keys to be authentically who I was at that age, and often through education and through parenthood, and we're trying to prepare people for adulthood, and we're doing it through our own lens of how we see the world. And often our own lens is outdated, especially as parents and teachers, and we're the ones who need to to change and to evolve and to start living in the world that we've brought our children and our next generations into. But for me, my circumstance was so unique and the future was so uncertain that no one had a clue around me what my future looked like. So therefore, all they could do was just allow me to be me and figure it out for myself and be there for me. And then, so all of a sudden, these character traits that were getting me in trouble, at school and with maintaining friendships and relationships, like this big gob that I didn't know how to use, this competitiveness that was getting me in trouble, always wanting to win, stubbornness, those things, one, kept me alive, and then two, gave me tools to use going forward. So, the people around me, it wasn't necessarily conscious. There was just no other choice. It was like, this kid's got to figure it out for himself, because we don't know what his future is going to bring, because it's so uncertain, because there is no necessarily a path that we know that he can follow. He has to figure that out for himself. So in one way, it's awful that something like that happens to 14. But by going back and going over my story and thinking about it from the context of like from today, from the present, it's like, my God, like, look at the gifts I was given at 14 to just be who I was and figure out like a way forward without thinking, should I be a different way? Am I fitting in? Am I doing these things? No, this is who I am. This is all I've got. Future's uncertain. Let's go for it. And you figure that out. So if we can give young people that freedom and those tools, then they'll figure it out for themselves.
Wow. Do you think that?
Maybe.
No. But I think you're right. Do you think we don't give kids enough autonomy? Do you think the system that we actually, when you relate to the education system, we almost take that autonomy away from them a bit, don't we? And not allowing them to explore, be curious about who they really are. We don't. Maybe there's more. Like, there was a guy who come on recently, John Barnes, and he's wrote a book around rewilding organisations. So like his son, they took to from 6 when he was 6 years old. They went over to Costa Rica, went in a child-led school in the Costa Rican jungle, and he didn't actually start mainstream school till he was 12 years old. Like, homeschooled, and a mixture of homeschooling and forest school and stuff like that, and just allowed to have autonomy. And he chose to go to school, mainstream school at 12. He's just finishing his GCSEs and flourishing. And you're like, amazing, right? Because he was allowed that, and to really know, then find out who he is as a person. I think there's something so. And he goes into organisations now and helps organisations give more autonomy to staff members and stuff like that, because they're using that as such a skill. And I think listening to your story, there's so much like again, so much of the lessons you were almost forced to learn that, and the environment, and because of the accident, you was forced into those positions. But you just referred to it as what a gift to be able to have had at a young age. And again, is it something that if we gave kids that a little bit more autonomy, maybe they do figure out. But with guidance, I guess, I don't know, how much guidance did you have there at that age as well?
Well, I think structure is still important. So I think, you can push the needle a bit too far and give kids too much autonomy. Yeah. They need those kind of safety nets around them and a bit of structure. But yeah, totally, the system is just not fit for, the world that they're going into with, everything with AI and stuff, that it's already obsolete, so much of what's been taught with them. There's some really good stuff actually, because Thrive Now still exists in a weird way. We're doing that. The seeds of it's been grown in a different direction. It's now become Thrive Now Education. So we're in our third co-partner stayed involved, and partnered up with who she's leading at Kimberly, who I think would be someone brilliant to have on your podcast. And Thrive Now Education is now launching a school in Kingston, and it's I think they're kind of attaching themselves to a current school to start with, but it's a whole new kind of syllabus and a way of education, and giving kids the tools to move into this uncertain world that's going on. And it's incredible the work that they're doing, and there's many organizations like that happening, but it's not happening quick enough, because if you look at the speed of AI and the development, but yeah, I think giving them more autonomy, but them not feel like they're completely uncertain, because I still had quite a lot of structure to my life, but I was only at school part-time because I was in hospital so much. So, but what I was learning in hospital and from incredible people who were, compassionate care and, medical, I was just learning so much about people and humans, and seeing other people suffering and recovering. And, that was, so I had that human side to my education, when a lot of peers my age didn't have that. It was still this very much this create worker bees from industrial revolution kind of education. So definitely I think giving kids more autonomy, but doing so in the context of still that they still have that, that safety net around them is vital.
I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. I'm keen to explore as well, I guess, like you said, the biggest lessons that you've learned, especially these last few years. I'm really keen to, like, this journey that you've gone on and through your writing, and what's if you had to capture it, what would be those biggest lessons that you've about life, and about yourself as well, do you think?
I think, understanding where the energy is in my body. So the kind of the more kind of leaning on the slightly more sort of spiritual Eastern philosophy side of things. And, I don't get too heavily into that, but God, once you understand where your energy is in your body and you realize where you're making decisions from, it's like, it's really powerful to have that kind of groundedness.
Give us an example of that. Like what?
Well, it's, if something, flatters your ego and you feel, good, I think once you're aware of it, and I'm not a practitioner of this, I was very lucky that I, worked with Nicole for 15 months, and there is people who are qualified to do that. So I think mindfulness techniques are really important for that, breath work, knowing how to like ground your energy. And then once you start making decisions from that space, you realize that, but doing so also knowing what, your core values are at the moment. They're really important things. I think not worrying so much about outcomes, the process and making the right decisions from that place is important, and not putting too much onus on results and outcomes. And I think that's really important when it comes to career choices and learning to embrace change and to sort of to back myself. The power of your own story, I think, is the biggest resource that you got. So understanding that I needed to tap back into my own story was ever so important. And it was almost like my first book will be, the working title is The Gift of Adversity. It's almost like my origin story. That's where I know where I can get my strength and resilience, and it's more of a kind of intrapersonal journey. So it's the internal one. And by doing that, then it allows me because there's overlap between the first book and the second book that only really sort of came to me in the last 6 months when I was having these unbelievable conversations with people while I was on the road writing. It was like I was putting this energy out to universe, and it was bringing the people that needed to come and sit. There was an empty seat next to me, and people would come and share unbelievable stories of me and open up to a stranger like me. So unwittingly, they were becoming my first beta readers. And I realized that it's just from that grounded space with this energy I was putting out, the people that I needed were coming into my life. So then I also looked back at periods of my life where I had success, how both of us maybe used to define it. When I was at the very top of the poker industry and winning awards and lauded and highly thought of and well known, but within a niche industry, I look back now and then starting my business and realized that my energy was up here, and the people that I was surrounded by weren't necessarily serving me, or I was serving them in the right way. So understanding that the good times aren't always the good times as you think they are. So then the next evolution, and this is what I want to talk about in the second book, I realized it was more about the interpersonal relationships and the connections with the people around us. Is what makes us human beings. Is how we come together as communities. We're not supposed to be isolated. And I realized that, if I gave off that energy that brought the right people into my life, and I could create that energy and allowed those people to be seen, that the most important thing was not necessarily me or you, but the space between us, and how we can both be here completely equal and without judgment, and allowing the other person, allowing you, Sam, to turn up exactly as you are today, whatever you've been going through, without putting you in a box too much, without labeling you too much, without anything, just allowing you the freedom to turn up exactly as you are. And then you allowing that to me, that connection, that build, that bonds between us is so powerful. And, and I think if you can create more and more connections like that, then we will, create the kind of communities that will, have real impact and change in our lives.
Wow. And do you think, do you think with the advancements of AI that, because up till now, do you feel like we've lost that sense of community a little bit in society? And with the advancements of AI, we need to, that's what we're ultimately what we crave, right? We crave that connection, community, and people around us. Like, where do you sit with that? Do you think that we're with the advancement of AI, we need to hold on to that more and build more community? And
I think we probably lost it when we stopped being hunter-gatherers, if I'm honest. So-called civilizations and so-called civilized people. It meant you need to kind of take from someone else so you've got enough for your people. Whereas before we would move and be in tune with the earth and with other animals and stuff. So, but it's to a certain point, focusing on what we can control and what we can't control. And, we let the cat out of the bag with social media far too easily. And, I still think we should be in tribes where there's only a certain amount of people that we can kind of connect with. That's why in ways we need to make our world a bit smaller if we can. I go back to that, the pond analogy or metaphor that I was talking about before. I want to drop pebbles in my pond, and hopefully people next to me in their own pond create a little ripple. And if enough of us in our own ponds create ripples, we can create, waves and then tsunami, a change in society, rather than looking at the ocean that is AI. If we start thinking about the ocean that is AI, and the waves and the tsunamis of change that it's going to cause in society, that's a big thing for us as individuals to hold. Whereas I think we need to bring it back again to the individual and to you and yourself, and then build from here, and then build with the people around you, rather than be like, there's enough people out there in the world, right, who are thinking about these big problems and in these positions. As why we elect people. And I want to let them worry about the really, really big things. And I want to, again, figure out what worked for me and within my own story. And it's bringing it back to to the origins of who we are as people and my own story, and just start small, start with me, start with inside me, start with my pond, let people be as much as I can be and drop pebbles. I put that in my diary at the beginning of last year, like a daily reminder. I was worrying so much about what other people were doing still, that I just, like, every single day, like a mantra almost, was let people be. And then this year I've added let people be and drop pebbles. So it just reminds me to, again, still let people be, and me just drop pebbles in my pond, and what will come from that will come from that. And I'm creating the connections based on that, and we'll see what comes from it.
It's such a brilliant one. It really resonates with me, because I've been doing like doing some like weekly journals to camera, just about building the movement of you all right, mate, and just trying to how I've moved the needle this week, and then what my reflections are on the week. And one of the things that the episode that come out Sunday night was, it took me a few days to reflect on Tuesday, like the event, and I was really proud of it, and I had some lovely feedback, and you put that lovely post out, and but it sat with me for a little while, and the question I was finding myself asking was, this thing, this mission I'm on, is it too big for me? Right? But listening to you talk there, and it did remind me of Dan Gainsford said to me as well about change our small corner of the world, but just listening to you, like, maybe the mission isn't, I'd love to go, I've impacted, reduced male suicide, it'd be incredible, right? But maybe I just need to drop a couple of pebbles in my little pond and know what I'm doing in here, and know it feels right, and what that looks like. Start with me, and then maybe we start some ripples. That's just the way you've framed that. I think if we all reframe, like you said, if we was all doing that, what change could we potentially make?
Yeah, because there's you can go back to that, the oxygen mask, metaphor on a plane, right? Is you've got to make sure that you put it on yourself first before you other people. I don't necessarily agree with that in every single context, because sometimes the helping other people is the very thing that keeps you going, right? Especially when it comes to like suicide prevention and people who have lost like loved ones in their immediate family. The very thing that keeps them going is making sure that other people don't go through the pain that they're going through. So I don't think it works in every context, but I do. I'm part of this organization called the Speakers Collective, and we're 250 strong community, and we're people who talk about lived experiences and meet up and have summits and different things. And there are a few people in that I worry that they are using their own journey and their story to heal themselves as they're doing it. So, and I'm not necessarily saying that you're doing that with your right mate, but what you need to do is just to make sure that you're conscious that you are still doing it from the inside out, rather than needing and repeating some of the same mistakes that you might have made before in terms of external validation to prove that what you're doing is a good thing, to feel good about yourself. And that's only a question that you or anyone else can answer. And it doesn't mean that those two things can't coexist as well. So it doesn't mean that you can't still want to have this mission and have the impact that you want, but it cannot be at the cost of losing, and making sure that you've got that little pond and you're dropping pebbles for yourself first, and how you're reaching the people around you.
I love that. Yeah, wow.
And the answers don't have to come straight away, right? Just keep journaling, keep writing.
I need to do what you've done, get in me van.
Get in your van, mate. Well, I can pop the roof. You can go upstairs, mate. And
mate, I tell you what, I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah.
Actually, I can come along. I've just told you, got my bike. I'll come alongside of my bike.
There we go.
Mate, let's do that.
Yeah,
we're going to do that. That's the
trip.
next 6 months.
There we go.
Well, one thing here I've put as well around, like, I guess, and this aligns with what you sort of just said. I wonder, like, this connection that we sometimes have with ourselves, like, where do we, I guess, trying to recognise that, like, you've gone on that journey to really connect with yourself. prior to that, did you feel disconnected?
Maybe not connected enough.
Okay.
Because, I've always been very lucky that, I stumbled into the poker industry kind of accidentally, really. And, that for 15 years played a really big part of my life. And a lot of people have wrote some really nice stuff about me over the years, about the energy that I give off and how I'm kind of magnetic and draw people in and people just want to hang around me.
Yeah, 100%.
So I've never felt like disconnected from people, but the needle was too much on, the energy up here. So it wasn't black and white. I was always somewhere in the grey, but I needed to come more to the light and the clarity and to move. And I realized, then by going back and looking at, my story as a whole, not just that 5 years, but the 25 years that came since that, I had these incredible experiences, traveling around the world and hanging out with celebrities and going to these amazing parties and traveling and meeting incredible people, and at times having unbelievable conversations with people from various areas of the world about hardships that they've been through. But weirdly, there were moments, in the darkest parts of my journey where I never felt more alive. I never felt more connected with what it means to be a human being and how pure those moments were. There were periods, and I look back and it's just, I'm almost writing my own story objectively. And I'm like, how the hell did I do that? How the hell did we do that as a family? And it's like, my God, life's so much easier now compared to that. But then I look back at those moments, not with fear, but with pride, and thinking, not only were we doing like ridiculous amounts of things in every single week, but how, looking back, my parents are still there for other people and still part of the community, and all those things are there. And it was just like, wow, it was an unbelievably traumatic time, but it was an unbelievably beautiful time as well. And you circled around this a bit earlier, is that that adversity is not what happens to us, it's how we face it, it's how we process it. And we have, I think, too much of a fixed idea in society now that, someone must feel like that because that happened to them, that it's almost become too homogenized, too much content written about what other people must be experiencing. And again, it's that outside in way of living.
And I guess, like, for me, what comes out of your story and what you shared a little bit there is that, like, reframing it to like the gift of adversity, right? The gift that, imagine, and I'm sure that the book will have, just because I know your story and you've been, it's so inspiring that how many people that maybe are struggling either, and if they can just, and how much that their adversity has defined them or held them back so much, whereas by you sharing your story, you're even helping them to reframe that slightly and seeing how it can potentially become a gift because of the lessons, if we can take them out. What a gift alone that would be to the world, right?
Yeah, totally. And one of the most amazing things that I've done by, researching and writing is I've gone back and I've found people from my journeys. I found the first care assistant that looked after me in Dublin, I found him in Dublin and I met up with him, and I wanted to show him that, he was a guy that, was refusing to go home at night, was ringing at 11 o'clock at night when he got home to make sure that I'd gone to sleep, would come in the morning before he put scrubs on to make sure I was still alive. He reminded me that I kicked him in the head a couple of times. I wasn't perfect, mate. And to give him some closure on that, to realise, I turned out right, mate. When I found my physiotherapist, Claire, who was single-handedly the most important person outside of my family and loved ones in terms of my recovery. And, I wanted to go and show her how she was one of the main reasons that I only ever had 15 minutes of therapy. I chased the therapist out of the room after 15 minutes because she was trying to put stuff in my head. She walked out shaking her head, going past my mum and the nurses going, that kid could give me therapy. But the truth was I had therapists all around me, and when I needed it, I went and found her. And, tragically, she lost her daughter when she was 19, just before pandemic. And then, you know, I came back into her life, and maybe at a time that she needed it. And we sat for 3.5 hours in Richmond and just talked. And I was like, I wouldn't be who I am without you. And
what was her response? Like, how did?
wow, she was just like, yeah, blown away. I said, it's really important, the work I'm doing now. But also then it was a gift that I could give back to her to help her reframe the horrific years that, you know, losing a 19-year-old daughter in a drunk drive accident, you know, just before the pandemic. And then bang, you're in lockdown with a 15-year-old brother. And my God, a tough few years. But it doesn't have to define the rest of her life. And she was coming out of it and can find more hope and realise that even through, you know, losing a child, like we both know, like the work that Mo Gadwat's done in terms of the impact that he's gone on to have after losing his son. So like no one chooses adversity, but it's going to come our way whether we like it or not. So we can shy away from it and try and stay in our little happy bubbles. But how's that preparing us, you know, for what comes? And the more we go back and learn about, you know, our own adversities, the more that when we're in the middle of it, we realize that it's temporary and we will come out. And some of my favorite times in life, when I know that I've come out the other side of adversity, it's like, you know, the dawn is breaking after the darkest moment in the night. And I'm so aware of those moments. And I've got so much gratitude. It's, you know, like the lowest common denominator for me is like when you have a mouth ulcer. And when I have a mouth ulcer, I'm like, why am I not more grateful that this thing isn't hurting me when I don't have one, right? You know, and there's that morning that I wake up and I'm like, stick my tongue where the mouth ulcer was, and it's not there anymore. It doesn't hurt. And for that morning, I just make sure I'm so grateful. By 1 o'clock, I've completely forgotten about it. Yeah. But for that few hours that morning, I'm so grateful I don't have a mouth ulcer. And I started to notice the little things in life so much more because I'm full of that gratitude.
And does that help you to live in the now more, to live in that present moment? Because, like, you know, like obviously from the 100th episode, one of the 5 pillars in the framework is presence, right? And how important that is. But we're in a society that is constantly trying to force us not to be present.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, such brilliant messages through what you've just said.
Bring it back to that zone of contentment, right? That I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So in 2021 or 22, whenever it was, you know, I got shingles and COVID, like bang, like 1 week after the other, and turned into like long COVID, or it could have been shingles for, you know, for months. I was every afternoon, pretty much I'd have to go to bed, and I was like, you know what, you've been in moments like this before, and I think it was in that time that I kind of figured out this kind of, in my mind, you know, this zone of contentment, and it's you know, and it's, I refuse to let myself get down to the, you know, if it's a pendulum, say with like 1 to 10 on it. I try and flow between like 4 and 8, you know, somewhere in there. And I knew it was down at like 3 and 4 at that point, but I'm like, I'm not going to let it go down to 3, 1 or 2. I'm fine. Okay, this now gives me the opportunity to journal like you've never journaled before, to read like you've never read before. You can say no to people and put yourself first because there's nothing else that you can do. So I was, you know, on my own in my flat at that point, living on my own. And I was like, this is okay. Like, you can be content. You can just read and do these things and just bring it right back to this. And then bang, I came out of it, and I got, you know, and I got the energy. And honestly, when I went back out and connected with people, I was up at the 7s and 8s, and I wouldn't go up to 9 and 10 because you push that pendulum too far, it's going to swing back the other way too much. I just felt so much gratitude when I could get out, when I could go for walks and in the spring air, and I knew that was going to come, but I wasn't going to force it to come. I was just going to, as you said, stay present, just be content, and the good times will come back again. But don't get too carried away when they do come.
It's such a brilliant message, and it's not like one of my favourite sayings, and one I live by really, is "This too shall pass," right? And that really helps, because when times are really shit, you try and hold on to that, right? This too shall pass. But I also try and remind myself when you're having it off and things are great, that just be mindful that this too shall pass as well. So
exactly.
you're gonna thing, and that's just life, right? But it does. I love that. Like, I'm going to take that with me. I'm going to keep that one, mate. The zone of contentment. Right?
Well, I think we just explain the same things, just using different words, right?
Yeah, I love that zone of contentment. Like just finding that, and not, yeah.
You can say be like water, just wherever you want,
Yeah.
So many different ways of saying it, but it's just,
I've wrote something here that I'd love to say about the whole connecting with ourselves, the disconnection, all of these things. Do you think most people are living a life they consciously chose, or one they've slowly drifted into?
Oof, that's a big question. Say that again to me one more time.
Do you think most people are living a life they consciously chose, or one they slowly drifted into?
Well, I've slowly drifted into my life and I'm quite content. So I don't know like what the percentage would be on that. I think probably consciously chose, but I maybe think people with the right mindset who have slowly drifted into a life are the ones that are more grounded and more content, rather than the ones that have tried to, because if you're trying to consciously choose something, I feel like you're consciously trying to choose a result, and it's a destination. And if you don't get to that destination, then you're not content, or you keep pushing and wanting more and more and more. Whereas ones, again, you can just be more like water and just have drifted into things, but have focused on, the more human foundational aspects of life and focused on those, connection, community, compassion, communication, creativity, all the lovely C words that exist, rather than have I got the car? Have I consciously chosen a career that's going to get me to get that house? Have I gone out there and tried to get, the most beautiful partner? Have I consciously chosen to try and hit all these markers that, since the Second World War, since we become this consumer economy, if I have, tried to hit all those markers and they haven't hit them, or they've hit them, but inside they're still struggling. And what right do they have to struggle because they've hit all those markers? So I think actually, I don't know the percentages, but I'd much prefer to be, and I have been, someone that's just drifted into life a lot more and focused on the kind of human foundational skills. I don't like calling them soft skills because it devalues them. For me, they're human, they're foundational. And I think all these markers are just, capitalist markers that are the bad side of capitalism, and they don't guarantee anything. So I don't know if I quite answered your question, but I answered it in a different way.
Absolutely brilliant answer for me. Because one thing I've taken, what I've watched and been fascinated by, of watching your journey over the last, and in your writing and reading and seeing your journey, that you've allowed yourself the space to just be. And I think I've been so guilty, and I still am, maybe even today, and on that journey, and we're in a society that constantly teaches us to be productive, to keep pushing, keep driving forward because of the capitalist society that we're in, and keep pushing. But actually, because I read that question and a few times, I was thinking, how would I answer that? And I haven't been clear on the answer, but how you've articulated it so brilliantly, because if we can allow ourselves the time to just be, and I'm conscious of people maybe listening, going, yeah, it's fine. I've got to pay the bills. I've got to go and do this. I haven't got time to just be. I've got to work 2 jobs just to pay my mortgage. I get that. But what would you say? Because I completely agree with you. But what would you say if people are listening in and that's what's going through their head as we're talking now? What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, you can still do those things and be present, right? How many people are hitting all those markers, but how many hours are they on their phone or social media, and not just being present with their kids. How are they still spending so much money maybe on material things that don't necessarily help the more human and foundational things flourish, right? And it's not their fault, right? I think it's proven that we're very malleable as people and susceptible to the invisible kind of powers and mental games that have turned us into consumers and do all these things. You can do like John Barnes did, right? You can take your kids to Costa Rica. You can do those things. You can spend your money creating these more human foundational skills if you want to. You don't necessarily need the big car and the second holiday home and all these things. And the thing is that, again, I'm not, I'll bring it back to this. It's just, I know what's worked for me, right? And I can have an opinion to a certain extent, and I don't want to give like too much advice as much as try and inspire. But I do think specifically when it comes to something close to both our own hearts, male suicide. And when I did the Baton of Hope stuff a couple of years ago, and I stood on the stage, and I just only gave like a 4.5 minute speech, but the one bit that people kept coming back to me was that they fed back to me that I felt was really powerful was that I said to my mum one day in a pub, and it's like, I don't necessarily, I care about that person who sat over there in the corner who's tried to hit all those markers and have done them, but inside they're really suffering, and what right do they have to suffer? It's, I think so much of male suicide, comes from that disconnect with who they are, despite the fact that they've done everything that they've been told that they need to do, and still they're not, don't feel like whole. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why it's not about reclaiming masculinity and feminism is the antidote to masculinity and all these kind of things that we're hearing now at the moment. It's not about that. It's more human, it's more foundational, it's more connecting with our loved ones, and it's, for me, not trying to hit those markers that are just created to make us spend more, to make us take on more debt, to suck more money up. It's about people, it's about connection with ourselves, it's about connection with other people, with loved ones. And I think we've lost a lot of that. So I don't know if that necessarily answers what those naysayers might say if they hear this and disagree.
But, mate, I think you're, I'll tell you what, while we're chatting about that as well, I do want to, because I hadn't thought about maybe delving into this, but I would like to get your impression on the manosphere, what the Louis Theroux documentary, what was your main takeaway from that, watching that?
That young adolescents need really good role models, and not necessarily people that are our age, but people who are, the half a generation or so in front of them. I think a lack of strong role models within the home had a huge impact on why these individuals feel a need to, they're driven by things that they might have gone through with their parents in the home, and they didn't have that, that kind of solid upbringing that they need, and it's coming from a place of pain and trauma, which, again, I think we need to show empathy to these people as well, which I think is really important, because fighting hate with hate and anger with anger doesn't work. We need to live with empathy and love where we can. Obviously, it's going to be hard to love some of these guys, but they weren't shown enough of that, and that's why they are. But also, we need to kind of educate young people that these guys are running a pyramid scheme, it's a Ponzi scheme, and it's only the people at the top that are going to get the wealth from this. And it's important to take action, but it's not important to take action at the cost of others. And find good role models for them to tap into and try and take up some of that space that exists. which is tough to do, especially with the way, social media companies and our algorithms work. But it's important that we don't fight anger with anger, and I'm seeing too much of that in the world. It's just, seeing the way that the left are turning against the right, and the people of our age and even older, and the hate speech that goes back and forth. It's like, just because someone's like, I feel like every time you act like that, you're eating up a bit of your own soul by doing that. And just because someone's like wronged you in a certain way, it's, two wrongs don't make a right, go back to, I was told that as a 5-year-old.
You're so, just a couple of things there for me really stand out. I think the role modelling, mentorship. Someone mentioned to me about eldership the other day, and saying like about how we just need more. We need those more role. And do you think there's a lack of those good male role models in society at the moment? Like, because again, unfortunately, the algorithms and the news and the media will focus more on the hate because it sells more than.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's almost like the generations in between are the least important for role modeling. If we just look at the way that society has been for the last couple of 100 years, I think peer-to-peer support is really important. I think when you're in school, the year or 2 or 3 above you, you look up to them. You're like, I want to be like, that fastest runner in the school, like when I'm that age. And then you despise your teachers, right? But I also think like the way that homes were constructed, and my uncle said this to me, wise man, my uncle Porrick, and he was talking to me about, he lives in Ireland, but he's talking to me about post Second World War in London and all the tenement houses, and how they were, basically they've been wanting to get, the powers that be wanted to get these people out of the inner cities because this is valuable, like real estate. And when loads of them had to be pulled down with the, after the Second World War anyway, they reframed them as slums, right? And you can't possibly live in slums. And, how can people go to the toilet outside and all these things? So what we need to do, we need to develop these, brown lands on the outside of city centres, and we'll put all the problem people out there, and we'll get them away from the rich real estate, which we want to take hold of. But the problem in doing that is that they create these little boxes that put people into these little flats and these high-rise buildings, and poorer people with, a lack of opportunities to stay in education and get resources like the more privileged. Suddenly they weren't living in 3 generations of your family. And working class people of that age, the mum and the dad had no choice but go out to work and do whatever they could just to put food on the table. And there was no proper welfare state till after the Second World War. So you had no choice but to look after your parents, right? When they became elderly. So you all lived in the same house together. And while the parents were out working, and the kids would come home from school, it was the grandparents that were creating the moral fibre that would go down. So much of the moral fibre that existed in society and how it was maintained, and, the respect of the East End and all these things. And they did what they needed to do to survive, and there was a lot of crime, but there was so much respect for your elders there. And that came from the grandparents, leapfrogging over the parents to give that. And so I think that could be a lovely way to really allow wisdom to drip down by, somehow it'd be brilliant if we could, and give much more worth to life of like elderly people as well, to get them communicating with younger people. And so I love the fact that like peer-to-peer kind of mentorship, and then maybe get the wisdom of, and old people and young people get on brilliant. You see grandparents with their grandkids on the park. It's a beautiful thing. You don't see them arguing like they do with their parents in the park.
Wouldn't it be like, and I bet for elderly people as well, that, because my big thing, one of the things I've gone through and I've learned from the conversation I've had is about, lifelong learning, right? Lifelong learning. If there's one thing that I would say, my biggest teachers, the people who've taught me the most about life, are probably my 10-year-old twins, right? So I go like, then you go to elderly people and that next generation. Yes, the wisdom that they can impart on the young, but what can the young also teach the elderly, right? About life and what brilliant conversations they would have. Imagine, man, that'd be a great podcast, wouldn't it? Get
It'd be brilliant.
a teenager, someone in their young 20s, and then maybe someone in their 70s or 80s, and let them have a conversation about life and what that would, the shared wisdom, but on different scales, right, would be
big time, because older people just feel alienated so much, and there's so much. You know how quickly the world's moving with technology and stuff. It's the grandkids that often teach them how to use the iPads and do all these things, right? And they have much more patience with each other. You don't necessarily have the patience with especially when you're, going through hormonal phases of life, right? Often, puberty might hit when your parents are either going through a midlife crisis or menopause or whatever it may be, and it can be fractious within the home, whereas you give a lot more patience. I think it's, skipping a generation of doing it and bringing communities together, I think it would be a beautiful social experiment to do, and just to see and reconnect those generations.
Well, I was going to ask you the question.
It's a new mission for you, mate. Sorry. That's a new mission for you.
It's a new mission. It's a new mission. Well, one of the questions I've been asking a bit late, because obviously, like, I'm on this mission and I want to make change. And obviously one of the things I've focused on is how do we change the education system? Does that help with mental health crisis later in life? And I'm around that. But for you, what would you change? Like, if you're Prime Minister tomorrow, I'll make you Prime Minister tomorrow. Where would you start with the mental health crisis that we're in?
I would make being teachers like one of the most lauded after and well paid professions in the land. Yeah, I just think if we could get incredible teachers, pay them really well, if we can resource schools way better than they are, we can get rid of all these ranking systems and give a lot more autonomy back to the very best individuals that exist in this society, and give them the keys to bring up, the future generations of kids in the way that we want them to, not by this, rule books that create I think there needs to be more flex and individual kind of freedom to teach. But if we trust the very best people to do that, then I think they'll get on with it just fine. And I think that it would prevent so many problems in society. Yeah, I just think we've just got it so wrong.
I think you're right. I think
underpaid, under-resourced, overworked. Like, they're just so worried about just passing exams. Curriculum is just so fixed. How does it help, like, all the different, diversity that we have in childhood? And it's just, we're not allowing them to be. We're still trying to fit them into a system even now. And it's just like, no.
You're so right. You're so right. And I think, because I feel so sorry for teachers, because it's actually, I think there's some brilliant teachers out there who really they get into it because they want to make a difference. They want to inspire that next generation, and they come into a system that doesn't allow them to do that.
No.
Like Max, who was there on Tuesday, who's obviously working with me, 10 years in education, he was like, I'm not making a difference.
Right.
I'm not making a difference here. You've got these reins on. Do you know what I mean? And I think that it just frustrates me, and I just think he's come out of it. We're working together and we've set up this thing, and he's got life education and he's teaching, amazing things, amazing skills and inspiring, really inspiring stuff. And I think you're right. We need to celebrate those teachers and give the teachers the freedom to be able to educate properly, and life educate. That's why I love that he's even called his thing life education, because that is one of the big questions I asked the other day when I was talking to a former head teacher. what is the purpose of education? This is what that we need a national debate on, right?
Yeah.
We need brilliant people sitting around a room going, "What? Let's rip this up and let's start again. What's the purpose of it, though? What's the purpose of education?" Because what it was is what you've highlighted today, right? It was for an industrial worker bees for an industrial revolution.
Yeah.
That's what was the purpose. That's redundant, and yet it's not changed. So if we figure out what the purpose is, and if the purpose is to create a well-rounded, emotionally literate, incredible next generation, then we've got to start doing things differently, right?
Yeah, exactly. We can't just be producing obedient people who would just come out and go from A to B, and that's what society needs you to do. Where's the individual in that?
Yeah. Oh, mate, it's been, as I knew it would be again, an amazing conversation. A couple of things as we're coming towards the end that I'd like to ask, I guess, like with what you've learned, especially over the last few years, what would you say if you went back to that 14-year-old, and what would you say to him?
I don't know if I'd say much to him, right? Because then it's even giving the power away to someone who's not that 14-year-old boy. You know, figuring it out was as much as what I figured out, right? So why would I give the power to future Mark to take care of present day Mark by giving him some advice? Really, what I'd just like to say is thank you for being who you were in present day Mark, because future Mark's really happy that you did do that. It's almost like I'd want to say thank you without him knowing I'm saying thank you for just doing what he needed to do for me to be someone who's sit here right now in the present and just grounded and content and connected.
I can't wait to read your book. It's going to be a game changer. It's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, but you know, I'm doing it, dropping a pebble in my pond for me, and whatever ripples come from it, and you know, what will be will be.
Before we do our closing tradition, if someone's listening today feels slightly disconnected with themselves, what would you invite them to start paying attention to?
What do they do in their life that trying to understand, like, you know, the energy within your system, and what makes you feel grounded, what makes you feel like most alive. So that means connected with yourself, and then what makes you feel most connected, like with other people. Just really focus on those things, and then and just like kind of just, I just love journaling and writing. Just write and think, because it makes you slow down. It makes you really think, and just allow time for those answers to come.
Mate, we've got a closing tradition on this podcast. These are our storytelling cards.
Oh yeah.
Which is a new closing tradition, because last time, episode 42.
This is all new.
This is all new. It's all new. So I want you to choose a card, any card.
Any card, pick a card. Let's go right in the middle.
And then you give that back to me and I'll read it out to you.
Okay.
There we go.
On the spot.
On the spot.
What's your favourite flavour of ice cream? No. It's going to go a bit deeper than that.
Imagine it. I might do a pack of them ones. How do you know when you're nearing burnout?
Oh, I don't want to be around people as much. I kind of retreat more. And I think a lot of people who have, you know, lower social battery than others, you know, recognize this kind of thing. my social battery is definitely lower than it was when I was younger, and I think that naturally happens with older age. But I think, I start retreating from the things that are kind of make me feel present. So when I'm not feeling present, and I retreat from people and connections and stop nurturing other people, then I realise, okay, something's not quite right here. I'm distancing myself. I'm not that kind of person. I love cooking, and I love cooking for people and nurturing, and I feel like if I just don't have the energy to do that, it's different. Like if you don't have the energy to go and play football or within this, or go for a run, but if you don't have the energy to do things that make you feel connected with other people, then there's something wrong within what's going on within your life. And so, probably 3 times I burned out when running 23D, and I noticed that in those moments that I started retreating from those things that, made me feel connected and alive. And, I think that's probably it.
I really, really resonate with that as well. Like, because I think we're quite similar. Like, I get my energy from people, right?
Yeah.
When I'm not feeling great, you can put me into a room, host an event, or just be at an event, or sit here and have a chat. Do you know what I mean? And like my energy goes back up, and I get my energy from other people, and yet, and I know that, and I'm conscious of it, and yet at the same time, when I'm struggling or I'm getting near, I know that I'm too much on or whatever. I'm similar. I isolate and retreat, and I'm like, I don't want to be around people when I know that that's the good thing for me. Do you know what I mean? But it's strange. I really resonate with that. But amazing, mate. Honestly, we're lining this up for part 3, because there's going to be a part 3 without a shadow of a doubt.
Another 100 episodes, eh?
There's going to be, but it's just so brilliant chatting to you. And from I guess from an outside looking in as well, seeing your journey develop, having that conversation with you, and then seeing the path you've gone on, has just been so amazing. And I've taken so much from today. Realise actually how much I probably needed this conversation today. So thank you so much. And like I say, I cannot wait to. Have we got an idea of the book? When have we got an idea of date wise, or what were we thinking?
No, again, I just can do what I can do, right, and do the outreach, and then I don't want to put a kind of a date on it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it'd be lovely to have something develop this year, but focus on the now, the next decision, and what I can do. I'll be doing the outreach very soon and see what comes from it.
Amazing. Well, mate, thank you for keep dropping them pebbles. And
thank you for inviting me into your pond.
Love that. Mate, what a brilliant conversation. Thank you. And I'll continue going out and inspiring and doing what you do, because you are a true inspiration. So
thank you. Likewise, Sam.
Thank you, my friend. As they say, it's a wrap.